And we're back. Today we are looking at First Kings. It is the 11th book of the Bible, and we are looking forward to discussing what happens in First Kings.
So what's the deal? What is this book about? Not the book of First Kings. What we've been reading for 10 books now, written by maybe different people, maybe the same people. What are we reading?
We are reading ultimately from creation to God, to the fall of mankind, to God choosing a particular nation, ultimately leading to the Messiah. And so this is going to be how God has worked through history ultimately to bring us Messiah.
Where do you see I haven't seen anything about a Messiah.
It's not there yet. Well, actually, it's not in First Kings, but it is it's peppered throughout with the covenants and with, even from early in Genesis, so that the snake was going to harm the ankle, and the covenant with Noah, the covenant with Abraham, repeated with Isaac and Jacob, that through their line all nations of the world would be blessed.
So there's some idea that there are two forces, some good and some evil, that are facing off against each other, right? And they're facing off within the hearts of men. And
yes. And through it all, and what we have seen thus far, and what we're going to see in First Kings, is that even the best of men are fallen. Even the best of men are in need of redemption. There needs to be a sacrifice, and that's the other thing which comes through in this first 10 books, is that there needs to be a sacrifice for sins in order to receive forgiveness of sins.
Yeah. So there's good, which is, of course, God, full of his steadfast love, his forgiveness, but he's also full of justice. Right?
Absolutely.
And then there's also this evil, which is not given, it doesn't have a head. It's
right.
just evil in the hearts of men.
And to this point, other than Eve, nobody is blaming anybody other than themselves. They're not blaming a different spiritual force. There's just a recognition that there's evil within us.
Yeah, and there are these other gods that show up, but they are, just that. They're just these other gods that are less powerful than the God that's shown himself through these books. And, they're able to make maybe snakes out of staves, or, a plague of locusts, a plague of frogs, but they're not able to take it away, and they're not able to, for instance, make a plague of darkness, or, make the plague of the Passover. There are these other gods that are set up as images. Somebody builds a gold statue and they decide, let's worship this. And, that is an evil of its own kind.
Right.
And we see that there are all these peppering thoughts, like you said, of sacrifices being needed to convey that justice, that the justice that should fall upon me instead now falls upon the sheep that I'm sacrificing. And we saw it with Abraham, the justice that would fall upon Abraham. He was willing to let it fall on his son Isaac. And, he said, of course, the Lord will provide. And the Lord did. And he isn't a God who wants human sacrifices.
Right.
And so then there's this idea of sonship and how that affects things. And these promises that God makes, that he'll make good things happen, that he'll make bad things happen. And then he follows through. And it's interesting because as much as it's like this history of things that have passed, it's also foretelling of things that are going to happen. Just like with anything, as you talk to someone, you get to know them, you get to know how they're going to act. You'll know how they're, as you've seen how they've acted in the past, you'll see how they will act in the future. And so, this is what we're seeing now, is the way God's acted in the past. He's going to keep on acting.
And he does that in spite of the failures of the kings. And we see that fairly quick as we get into First Kings.
Yeah. Starts off with David being an old man, and he is so old, so worn down that he can't get warm.
Don't I know it?
They keep putting blankets on him. Nothing is keeping him warm. So they get him a beautiful woman, and it's Abishag the Shunammite, and she'll show up later, but it says she's a very beautiful woman.
Yeah.
And she, took care of the king, and he did not know her. He kept her sacred in that way.
And so, that's how we begin. And David ultimately dies.
Mm-hmm.
And when he dies, one of his sons decides he's going to be king, Adonijah. But he's not the one who should be king. And so we have this this party that Adonijah throws, but it very specifically says he did not invite Nathan the prophet, Benaniah the mighty man, and Solomon his brother. So he has a party, but he avoids
the people who are in charge.
Yeah, the people who really needed to be there if he was going to become king. And the rest of chapter 1, most of chapter 1 is how Bathsheba is going to go to David and challenge him and say, shouldn't you announce who's going to be king when you die? Yeah. And he ultimately is going to announce that Solomon is going to be the king.
Yeah, and it's interesting because Bathsheba proves herself as someone that has power, right?
Yep.
That she can change the hearts of, at least David's heart. In some way, David still loves her enough that even though he has this young woman laying with him to keep him warm, that Bathsheba is still able to change David's mind. And it's actually something that comes up later, is that like the people that are your wives are able to change your mind about things.
Absolutely. I thought it was interesting after David says that Solomon's going to be the king. Then we get to verse 38. Zadok the priest, Nathan the prophet, Benaiah the son of whoever, they went down and had Solomon ride on King David's mule.
Yeah.
This must have been a famous mule, because when people saw that he was riding on David's mule, everybody knew it.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether they had some special braided hair or gems that put in his ear or tail or something, but
yeah, it seems like this mule at least is symbolic in some way, that it King David, known as this mighty warrior with his mighty men, he probably rode in on his mule every time he wasn't coming in from war, because you don't want to ride a mule into war, right?
Right.
But you might want to ride it in a time of peace, and it's probably the symbol that's saying, look, Solomon is this peaceful king that's going to come in and be the king in David's stead. And
the result of that, of course, is that Adonijah then gets real nervous, and people that were there celebrating him are all nervous, and they're concerned what's going to happen. And ultimately, Adonijah is afraid of Solomon, and he goes and he took hold of the horns of the altar, verse 50 of chapter 1. It's not the only time in 1 Kings that someone's going to take a hold of the horns of the altar. It struck me that he was able to do that when...
Uzzah...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uzzah gets killed for touching the Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah. So this altar is, in some way different.
Yeah. And this is before the building of the temple, so we'll see how that ultimately plays out. So chapter 2, David's time drew...
Well, I like Solomon's answer. Adonijah says, let King Solomon swear to me that he won't put me to death with the sword. And Solomon says, I don't care. If he's a worthy man, he's not going to fall. If he's wicked, he's going to die. He shows this, beginnings of his wisdom that David mentions. Actually, David says, you're a wise guy. It's like you're going to be able to be a good king.
Just he ends by saying, just go home. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Go to your house. So David is going to pass away, but he's going to charge Solomon, chapter 2. And there's a lot of repeats in here that basically say, keep the commands, act according to your wisdom, do not let this gray hair go down to Sheol in peace. Oh, wait, no, this is David, I forgot where I thought it was on this, but in chapter 2, I think David acts out of character. Because in chapter 2, he starts talking about people that have wronged him. So in verse 6, you also know Joab the son of Zeruiah and what he did to the two commanders of the army. So act according to your wisdom and do not let his gray hair go down to Sheol in peace. David is telling Solomon, deal with Joab because I wasn't going to. And then you go to verse 9, and he's talking about Shimei, the guy who hurled curses at him. He says, now, therefore, do not let him go unpunished, for you are a wise man, and you will know what you ought to do to him. And you will bring his hair down to Sheol with his blood.
Yeah.
Just to me, basically, he's saying, take care of this people that I didn't want to take care of.
Yeah, it's definitely a different side of David, but I don't know, to me it feels more like the same side that was David wants to build the temple, and God says, it's not for you to do, it's for your son. It seems like it for me, it feels a similar way, that David says, it wasn't for me to do because it would have been a useless showing of my power. But now you're actually my heir, and it's not a useless showing of your power. You know, I did all these great things that showed my power, but now you need to do great things to show your power.
Yeah. So we go through chapter 2. David dies, and then Adonijah ultimately is executed, and Joab is executed, and Shimei is executed. Solomon saying these people, he takes care of them. So then we come into chapter 3.
Yeah, and it says even the kingdom of was established in the hand of Solomon.
Yeah.
So it's like after he was able to do these things, then he was an established king.
And the people that were executed were all people who had sided against David and Solomon.
Yeah.
So Solomon's is solidifying his kingdom. The people are appreciative of him. They're now verse 3, Solomon loved the Lord, walking in the statute of his fathers David, except he sacrificed and burned incense on the high places. This is the first fissure that we see in Solomon, that maybe it's all not going to be copacetic. And then Solomon's famous prayer. God says, ask what you wish me to give you. And he says, I want to be wise. And then God's answer is, that's a great answer. I'm going to make you wise, and I'm going to give these other things to you as well.
Yeah, God says you could have asked for a long life or riches. Instead, you're asking for wisdom just to do what is right. Yeah. I'll give you long life and riches and wisdom. Yeah.
And that wisdom first shows up in one of the famous stories of King Solomon.
Yeah, immediately. The very next story that's written.
The two women that give birth, and one of their kids dies, and they're debating it, and Solomon says, well, we'll just cut them in half and give half to each of you, fully knowing that the woman whose son it really is wasn't about to let him get cut in half. And people were astounded, and they feared the king. They saw that the wisdom of God was in him to administer justice.
I think it showed wisdom that it didn't actually matter who was they couldn't do a DNA test or anything.
Right.
It didn't actually matter who was the real mother. Like, what it showed was the one who was going to actually be a good mother, who would take care of her child. And that's the one who's able to take the child. And all Israel hears the judgment, and they stand in awe because they perceive that the wisdom of God was in him to do justice.
Chapter 4 begins telling us who the officials in Solomon's court were, and I really liked what was said in verse 5. It says, Zabud, the son of Nathan, a priest, was the king's friend. He doesn't have any real position. He's just the king's friend. I don't remember him coming up later in the book.
He
may have, but because there's a lot of names. But
so many of them repeat or have similar sounds. It's hard to keep track.
So I thought that was a cool thing. And then I went on to verse 25, where it says, Judah and Israel lived in safety, every man under his vine and his fig tree, from Dan even to Beersheba, all the days of Solomon.
Mm-hmm.
They lived in peace.
Yeah, and Solomon has 40,000 horses and 12,000 men to ride the horses, I suppose. And, that comes up a few different times.
And also, we may not say something about it, but the amount of food necessary to take care of 12,000 horsemen and 40,000 horses.
Yeah.
It actually says 40,000 stalls. There could have been more than one horse in a stall, I suppose.
Yeah, I guess so.
And then another one which I thought was neat. Do you remember Ethan the Ezrahite, Heman, Calcol, and Darda?
I do not.
They are the four wisest men, other than Solomon.
Yeah.
Because in verse 31 it says Solomon was wiser than all men. Then Ethan the Ezrahite, Heman, Calcol, and Darda, the sons of Mahal, and his fame was known in all the surrounding nations.
Yeah.
Nobody's ever heard of the second wisest man.
Yeah.
I that was just, to me, it was kind of cool.
Yeah, I like the way just this whole section of that, the way Solomon's described. Solomon is given wisdom and understanding beyond measure, and breadth of mind like the sand on the seashore. Like very beautiful language about how wisdom he is, how wise he is. All the people is surpassed the wisdom of all the people on the east and all the people of Egypt. The people that are to the west of Israel.
And a broad range of knowledge. He spoke of trees, from the cedar that's in Lebanon to the hyssop that grows in the wall. He spoke also of animals and birds and creeping things and fish. He spoke 3,000 proverbs, and his songs were 1,005. Yeah,
you have to think David and Solomon must have had a really good relationship, because David is this renowned lyricist, this renowned writer, and David even knows that Solomon's wise before God is giving him this wisdom. And David, we have all these psalms from David, and I don't know that I would know any psalm that is written by Solomon. Maybe there are some, but there are none that stick out to me.
We'll have to check that when we go through the book of Psalms.
Yeah. So it's just interesting because, there's the Song of Solomon, which is its own book, the Bible, but
and the Proverbs of Solomon.
Right. So there are other collections of sayings from Solomon, but it's just interesting that they had two kings in a row that were just like writing all sorts of songs for all sorts of things.
Yeah.
And trying to honor God with that.
So we hit chapter 5, and there's an alliance with the King Hiram of Tyre, and they become friends. And Hiram is going to send people to help Solomon with building of the temple. I thought it was interesting. Verse 11, Solomon gave Hiram 20,000 cores of wheat as food for his household, and 20 cores of beaten oil. A core is the same as 10 bushels. So 200,000 bushels of wheat.
Yeah.
That's a lot of wheat.
That's interesting. Mine says 6 bushels or 220 liters.
Well, about, maybe there's a dry weight. No.
Yeah, who knows?
Liters, I don't know. But either way, it's a lot of wheat.
Yeah, and a lot of oil, right?
Yeah.
So, so Solomon is not just wise, but he's rich.
Yep.
And he's rich enough that he's giving away all this stuff.
Yep. He had 70,000 transporters, 80,000 hewers of stone, 3,300 chief deputies, 30,000 people in forced labor. There were a lot of people working for Solomon.
Right.
So we come to chapter 6, and it's the beginning of the building of the temple. And I found it interesting that I didn't put the verse down, but it was 480 years from the time that they left Egypt.
Yeah, it's from the beginning, in the 480th year after the people of Israel came out of the land of Egypt.
And, that we don't know, 480 years. And
Yeah, and it was 430 years that they were in Egypt, so it's been 910 years since Jacob was alive.
Yeah. And so David's going to build Solomon's going to build the temple, and that takes up all of chapter 6, and chapter 7 takes up the building of his own house. And honestly, I read that and I thought, I'll bet somebody has gone through and measured out what all these things, the measurements are, and I came away with both of those chapters thinking, these were magnificent buildings, magnificent in their decoration and their structure. I did wonder, because it seemed as though on my reading through, without going back and comparing each of them, it seemed as though maybe Solomon's home was better than God's home.
Yeah, it's unclear. It does seem like at least Solomon builds the temple made out of cedar. It said a few times that it's like only cedar, and then like inlaid with gold, overlaid with gold.
Yeah.
And then his house is made out of stone, and I don't know. I think maybe there's some level of like maybe more respect just for building it out of wood, or maybe it's less respect. Who knows?
Actually, it's both. Both of them have both wood and stone. In chapter 7, verse 2, he built the house of the forest of Lebanon. So, 4 rows of cedar pillars, cedar beams on the pillars, paneled with cedar above the side chambers. So, either way, they're both magnificent structures and overlaid with gold and phenomenal structures that he's going to live in them. And Hiram is going to participate in it and do an awful lot of the work. As a matter of fact, most of chapter 7 and I guess it's just chapter 7 is recounting what Hiram did for the building of both the temple and the house.
And there are these, I guess we don't know that it's beautiful because we can't see it, but at least it's described beautifully that pomegranates and rose and all sorts of different fruits, and then these cherubim that have these giant wings that from one wing touches one wall and then the other wing touches the other wall, and their wings touch in the middle, and laying over a shadow over the Lord.
Yep. So it's pretty phenomenal, and if you're an artist, you might want to try to go through and try to draw out what it looked like, but that's beyond my capability. Yeah. I'm content to just say it was marvelous. So the temple's complete. Solomon's house is complete, and Solomon's going to bring the Ark of the Covenant to the temple, and he does that in chapter 8. And I found interesting, verse 9, there was nothing in the ark except the 2 tablets of stone which Moses put there at Horeb, where the God made a covenant with the sons of Israel. In my memory, I thought that Aaron's staff was there, and a jar of manna. But I don't know where that comes from, but that was in my brain. Yeah. So I was surprised when it said all that was in it was the two tablets.
Yeah, I mean, it's been all around, right? So, maybe at some point somebody took those things out.
Yeah.
I thought it's interesting, verse 12, Solomon says, he's blessing the Lord, and he says, "The Lord has said that he would dwell in thick darkness. I have indeed built you an exalted house, a place for you to dwell in forever." It's interesting, some of these things Solomon says. The Lord has said that he would dwell in thick darkness.
That's interesting. The New American Standard says, in the thick cloud, coming from verse 11, that the cloud was there, the glory of the Lord filled the place. And so they bring it in, and then Solomon has this rather lengthy prayer of dedication. As a matter of fact, it goes from verse 22 all the way through verse 61 of that chapter. I noted verse 39 and 40 uh, that when the people turn and pray, then hear in heaven your dwelling place, and forgive and act and render to each according to all his ways, whose heart you know, for you alone know the hearts of all the sons of men, that they may fear you all the days that they live in the land. And then that comes up at other places, that in Solomon's prayer of dedication, he admonishes God, or asks God, to forgive people when they come to the temple and pray.
Yeah.
And actually it ended in verse 53. He finishes this entire prayer. He rose from kneeling, and as he spread his hands to heaven, he stood and blessed all the assembly of Israel. And verse 61. Let your heart therefore be wholly devoted to the Lord our God, to walk in his statutes, to keep his commandments, as at this day. That's how he is going to conclude his blessing to the people.
Yeah, and then a big feast. 22,000 oxen and 120,000 sheep.
Yep. Which I noted that's in verse 63. And this is happening in one day, I think. And that means that they were sacrificing approximately 1,000 oxen every hour. And whatever 24 divided by 120,000 divided by 24 is, that was the work of the priest was overwhelming that day.
And it makes sense then that the altar is too small to receive the burnt offering.
Yeah. Yep. So then we go on to chapter 9, and God has a promise and a warning to Solomon. Guess what? It's the same promise and warning he's been giving all along.
Yeah.
Obey me, you get blessed. Disobey, you get cursed. And then we come to verse 10. It came about the end of 20 years in which Solomon had built the two houses, the house of the Lord and the king's house. So it was 20 years it took for building these things.
Yeah.
Even with over 100,000 people working on it.
So it makes sense that they would do a really big feast at the end.
Yep. And I thought this section from verse 10 to 14 of chapter 9, Hiram had supplied Solomon with cedar and cypress and gold, and then King Solomon gave Hiram 20 cities in the land of Galilee. So Hiram came out from Tyre to see the cities which Solomon had given him, and they did not please him. He says, "What are these cities which you have given me, my brother?" So they were called the land of Kabul to this day, that is, as good as nothing. And then, right after that, Hiram sent to the king 120 talents of gold.
Yeah.
I don't like what you gave me. Here's 120 talents of gold.
Yeah, and if a talent's 75 pounds of gold, that's a lot.
Yeah. So then I went on to chapter 10.
Yeah, this Queen of Sheba who comes, and if I remember correctly, Sheba was mentioned earlier. There was a wise woman in 2 Samuel from Sheba who had some things to say.
That could be.
But now the Queen of Sheba comes, and she wants to ask Solomon questions. She's heard that he's wise. She wants to see how wise is this guy. And I like her answer. Solomon answers all her questions. There was nothing hidden from the king that he could not explain to her. And she says, "The report that I heard was true, of your words and of your wisdom. But I did not believe the reports until I came and my own eyes had seen. And behold, the half was not told to me. Your wisdom and prosperity surpassed the report that I heard. Yep. Happy are your men. Happy are your servants who continually stand before you and hear your wisdom." It seems cool that Solomon, is such an impactful king, so wise that when another leader comes and talks to him, they say, "Wow, the people who are around you must be very happy."
Yeah. So then, beginning at verse 14, we're told how rich and wise, again, Solomon is. And I thought verse 22 was quite interesting, just for Tarshish. King has ships that are sent, and every 3 years they came bringing gold and silver, ivory, and apes and peacocks.
Yeah.
He Solomon had a zoo, apparently.
Yeah. Yeah, you wonder where these things are coming from, and it's interesting because, right before that, silver was not considered as anything in the days of Solomon. It says a little bit later that Solomon was just giving everyone silver, that everyone was just had silver things to have.
Yeah.
That it wasn't just that his servants were happy, but all of Israel is just receiving all sorts of silver from Solomon because he's so well off that silver is like nothing to him.
Yeah. And verse 23, King Solomon became greater than all the kings of the earth in riches and in wisdom. All the earth was seeking the presence of Solomon to hear his wisdom, which God had put in his heart. Yeah. And they all brought gifts to him.
Mm-hmm. But it doesn't save him, right? He's
right.
This wise guy. I say wise guy, and it sounds like it's an insult, but he's the wisest person that's ever lived, perhaps.
Yep.
And it says, in chapter 11, he loved many women and many foreign women, and God wasn't happy with that.
Yep.
Because the Lord had said, "You shall not marry with them, and neither shall they with you, for they will surely turn your hearts away towards their gods."
And he had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines, and his wives turned his heart away.
Yeah.
As a result of that, you see, kind of beginning in chapter 11, Solomon suddenly has adversaries on all sides. At a time when there should have been and could have been great rejoicing, God raises up adversaries. And
from here on out, everything is just pretty downhill.
Yep.
For the line of David, for the people of Israel, at least within First Kings, everything's downhill.
It is interesting that, it is in chapter 11 that we are, at the beginning of chapter 11, we're told he has all these wives, and by the end of chapter 11, Solomon is dead.
Yeah.
So on one hand, it seems, wow, how can that be? And so they summarize, that he didn't get all those wives late in his life.
Yeah.
He kept accumulating them, and the result of that, ultimately, his heart is turned away, and the Lord was angry with Solomon, and eventually Solomon is going to pass away.
Mm-hmm. The Lord gives him this promise, like, things aren't going to go the way that you wanted, the way that they could have been. If you had just been like David and stayed true to the Lord your God, things would have been fine. But now you've turned towards these other gods, so things aren't going to go well. There's going to be another king.
Yep. And he says that he's going to withhold that judgment until after Solomon's gone.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as Solomon's gone, things start falling apart. From this point on, in the next, there's 12 more chapters, 12 or 13 more chapters. There are, in Judah, there are Rehoboam, Abijah, Asa, Jehoshaphat, and Jehoram as kings. And in Israel, there's Jeroboam, Nadab, Baasha, Elah, Zimra, who only served for 7 days, Omri, Ahab, and Ahaziah. There are a lot of kings all of a sudden in this split kingdom. And Rehoboam is the first in the kingdom of Judah, and we're told that he acted foolishly in an interesting way. So you already have this kind of division between Judah and Israel, and Judah has been lording it over Israel, and so Israel comes and says to Rehoboam, "Would you treat us kindly?" And the elders, the old wise men from Solomon's time, said, "You should treat them wisely." And Rehoboam decides instead he's going to listen to his young counselors, and he's going to make things harder on the people of Israel. Yeah. He said, "My little finger is thicker than my father's loins," basically saying, you ain't seen nothing yet.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing where Rehoboam wants to do, David tells Solomon, you have to build your kingdom. You have to, take down these people that have been standing against us. And, Solomon doesn't seem to give some parting words of wisdom to
Right.
Rehoboam, which is unfortunate because Solomon was said to be very wise. But Rehoboam might have not even listened because, he's not listening to these other counselors. And, of course, Rehoboam hears what the people want. He hears his advisors telling him to give what the people what they want, and he decides to go against it.
Yep.
And everyone turns away.
Yep. And the result is that the 10 tribes leave Judah, and they form their own nation of Israel. We have no inheritance in the son of Jesse. To your tents, O Israel. Now look after your own house. Look after your own house, David. Basically, now there's this division, and we start having, for a while, there's war between the two. And Jeroboam becomes the first king of Israel. But Jeroboam, right from the start, has walked away from God. He builds up his own altar. He makes 2 golden calves, and he has the people worship them. You got to believe that when you start off with that poor of a beginning, it's not going to turn out well. So that's chapter 12. And chapter 13, Jeroboam is warned that God's not going to put up with it, and God doesn't put up with it. Interesting that they're going to go to war, and they wonder which way they should go. And wait, no, that's later on.
No, I did actually. When the Lord promises Solomon that things are going to go bad, I had something I wanted to bring up, but I couldn't find it when we were talking about it.
Go now.
I just thought it was interesting. God promises, I will take the kingdom out of his son's hand, and I'll give 10 tribes out of his hand. And to David's son, I'll give 1 tribe, that David my servant may always have a lamp before me in Jerusalem, the city where I have chosen to put my name. And I will take you, and you shall reign over all that your soul desires, and you shall be king over Israel. And then it says, and I will afflict the offspring of David because of this, but not forever. And I just thought that was an interesting pointing towards, there's a future coming where the house of David is going to be redeemed, that the house of David is going to have this, this king that is the one true king over Israel, and is going to do some great things.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Jeroboam isn't going to be listed with the good kings.
Yeah. Basically, none of these guys are.
We do have a couple that are
That's why I
okay.
said basically.
So a prophet comes and he warns Jeroboam that things are going to go poorly. I think it was interesting that Jeroboam stretches out his hand and it dries up so that he could not draw it back, and he prays it gets restored, and it is restored. And the prophet that said this was told not to go back, not to eat or drink, eat bread or drink water, or return by the way which he came. And then this next section, and another old prophet comes and talks to this prophet and says, "No, I'm a prophet of God too. Go ahead and come with me and eat my bread and drink my water." So he does, and then once he does that, the prophet cries out, and the Lord says, because you have disobeyed the command of the Lord, and have not observed the commandment which the Lord commanded you, but have returned to eat bread and drink, your body shall not come to the grave of your fathers.
The old prophet comes and lies to him.
Very specifically says, I lied to you just to get you to come, or to get you to test you. And the result was that the prophet that talked to Jeroboam and said you're going to end up dying, he gets attacked by a lion. Interesting story that he's riding his donkey and he gets attacked by a lion. The prophet gets killed, and the lion stands there with the donkey, and the lion doesn't eat the body of the dead prophet until ultimately the old prophet comes and eventually brings the prophet that has spoken to Jeroboam to his own house and buries him in a grave and says, when I die, I want to be buried next to him.
Mm-hmm.
Just a fascinating storyline, which I'm not sure I know the import of it, the impact of it, except that you should do what God tells you to do.
Yeah.
And maybe you shouldn't lie.
Mm-hmm.
So that's chapter 13. And chapter 14, the Ahijah and Abijah. Abijah is the son of Jeroboam, and Ahijah basically says Abijah is sick, and they want to go to the prophet and hope that he gets better, and he says no, he's not going to get better.
It's interesting, the prophet is blind, it says, and Jeroboam's wife comes to him and covered up so that you can't see who she is, and God says to the prophet, hey, Jeroboam's wife is coming to try and make this better.
And blind or not, he just, as soon as she comes in.
Yeah, he hears the pattering of her feet, it says.
Yep, so, and that basically, that's going to bring us to the end of Jeroboam's reign. It says at the end, at verse 20 in chapter 14, Jeroboam reigned, his reign was 22 years, and he slept with his fathers, and Nadab, his son, reigned after him. Nadab then being the second king of Israel.
Yeah.
And let's see. I didn't say anything about the end of chapter 14 in my notes. But it is, we do note that in verse 22, Judah did evil on the sight of the Lord. They provoked him to jealousy more than all that their fathers had done with the sins that they committed.
Yeah.
That
a common theme throughout the rest of this book.
More than all the people before him. In other words, the slide just keeps getting worse and worse. And so now we have...
Abijah reigns in Judah, and he's more evil than everyone before him.
Yep.
And then Asa comes, and Asa actually follows in the line of David and is doing some good things.
Yep. The problem with Asa is in verse 14. Abijam only lasts for 7 verses in the text.
Right.
I forget what it says, how long he reigned, but there wasn't that many, not that much is dedicated to him. Asa then comes, and one of his mistakes is the high places were not taken away. Nevertheless, the heart of Asa was wholly devoted to the Lord all his days. But he didn't completely clean the land.
He didn't take away these altars to other gods.
Yep.
He just himself was wholly devoted to the Lord. Which, on one hand is good, and on the other hand is like, well, you were wholly devoted, but you didn't do all the things you needed to do. So,
and embedded in here, we find out that Baasha is the king of Israel. And that's actually going to show up again because they're doing parallel histories.
Yeah.
Chapter 15, 8 to 22 is all that we have of the reign of Asa. And then Jehoshaphat succeeds him. And then we go back to Israel, and Nadab dies, and Baasha rules over Israel.
So this book is not as much about the deeds of these kings, but is more about like when is this stuff happening, and like were they good? Did they do what was pleasing to God? And then starting in chapter 17, we get the story of Elijah. But basically all of these kings, it says, and they did this, they did that, they struck down some people, they put up altars to the wrong gods, God wasn't happy, they were more evil than anyone before them. And if you want to read more about that, there's the Book of Chronicles.
A couple of little side notes. 16:9, he was in Tirzah, drinking himself drunk. Okay, I'd like that to be one of the things that's remembered of you. Yep, you were there drinking yourself drunk.
Yeah.
And then I went to verse 30 and 31. Ahab, the son of Omri, did evil in the sight of the Lord more than all who were before him. It came about as though it was a trivial thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam, that he married Jezebel and went to serve Baal and worshipped him. As if it was a trivial thing.
Yeah.
And then we're going to get introduced to one of my favorite sections of the Old Testament, the ministry of Elijah, and corresponded to that, the reign of Ahab, because they're intertwined.
Yeah. It's like, if you were going to list the top 3 people you want to go on a mountain and eat dinner with, it's like Moses and Elijah are in that group.
Yeah.
So.
And you would be in the group for me. Just saying. So now we're in chapter 17, and I actually, because this is a section of scripture that I have preached numerous sermons on, and so I didn't actually highlight any, and because there's so much, it's so rich that you ought to read it for yourself, and you ought to read it 3 times.
Yeah.
You ought to read it and say, wow, that was amazing. The brook ran dry. How could the brook run dry? Wow, the oil never ceased. Wow, how could that be? Wow, he rose. He raised the widow's son from the dead. How can that be? Wow, he had the battle with the prophets of Baal and he won. How can that be? Wow, he said there's not going to be rain and there wasn't rain. Wow, and then he said it's going to rain and there's not a cloud in the sky. And he keeps sending his servant to go look in the sky, and when he sees just a little bit of a cloud, he says, hurry, 'cause the storm's going to catch you. Just amazing story of Elijah.
Yeah, and it is so contrasted with everything that's been before it. For the last 480 years of history that we've been reading, from Moses to now Elijah, things are getting worse. People are getting, every judge was basically worse than the judge before them. And then every king was worse than the king before them. And God has been around, and he said some things, and dealt out some judgment, and blessed some people, but he hasn't been as present in as he was for the Exodus, right, where he's casting these plagues and healing people. And for the Exodus it says, and in the house of Israel, nobody had a miscarriage.
Right.
It's like this great feat of power where God has his hand actively in the people of Israel. And then we get this guy, Elijah the Tishbite, who just shows up, and, he's not from the line of David, or, he's not this king from the line of David, at least.
He's just a guy that walked with God, but also a guy who's very human.
Yeah.
Very human. Twice in this passage in chapter 19, once he says, "Oh Lord, take my life, for I'm no better than my fathers." And then later on he says, "I'm the only one left." He's just, I want to die. He's gone to the heights of walking with God to the depths of despair.
Yeah.
And God redeems him and comes and cares for him.
Yeah, and I love God's answer too, because God doesn't say like, "Oh no, don't worry, like you're actually a great guy," or like you're very righteous actually. But he says, like, I get it. You want to be with me where things are good. Yeah. I want to be with you where things are good. But there's more to do. Let's set up somebody to come after you because I have more I need to do, and let's you have some more things to do. You have just a few more things, and then we'll let you go. Then we'll let you be done. I know the Spirit of the Lord weighs heavily on people. That's Moses has the same complaint. Right. He says, "There's too much for me. The Spirit of the Lord is too heavy. Can you give it to anyone else? Please just let it weigh on anyone." And God says, "Yeah, I know. We'll get 70 people and they'll all help."
Yep. I also like the way that God ends up speaking to Elijah. Behold, the Lord was... he says, "Go forth, stand on the mountain before the Lord. And behold, the Lord was passing by. A great, strong wind was rending the mountain and breaking in pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a sound of a gentle blowing. And that's when God spoke.
Mm-hmm.
Just in the still small voice of God. And we finish out chapter 19. Elisha is going to lay his mantle on Elisha, and he's going to have relief.
Yeah.
Till we come to chapter 20. The Ben-Hadad, the king of Aram, goes to Ahab and says, "Your silver and your gold are mine. Your most beautiful wives and children are also mine."
Yeah.
"Hello, I'm taking everything you like." And Ahab says, "Okay, you can have it." And then the Ben-Hadad comes, "You shall give me all these things, but I also want more of that. I'm going to search your house and I'm going to take everything you desire."
Mm-hmm.
Then the king says, "Maybe not.
Yeah.
I don't think I like that idea."
Mm-hmm.
Don't listen to that, to him and the elders say. Just an interesting little story there. And guess what? Ben-Hadad thinks he's going to do that, but Ahab ends up being victorious, which I think is an interesting dynamic, because Ahab is this bad king. Ahab is this king that Elijah is challenging.
Yeah.
But here, a prophet comes to Ahab and says, "Thus says the Lord, have you seen this great multitude? Behold, I will deliver them into your hand today, and you shall know that I am the Lord."
Mm-hmm.
Again, this is that dynamic of the fallenness of mankind,
Yeah.
and the forgiveness of God and the love of God in spite of our fallenness and our weaknesses.
Yeah.
Shown in Ahab, who is universally known as a horrible king.
Right.
So then we had some more condiments here, because the son of Israel were mustered
Mm-hmm.
and provisioned and went out to meet the Arameans and fight against him. I just had to say that because you were in the condiments yesterday.
Yep.
And so the king goes. Ultimately, the king is going to be told that I must have got a little tired here. A certain man of the prophets said to another by the word of God, "Please strike me." This is a prophet coming and say, "Strike me." The other man says, "No." And then the first prophet says, "Because you have not listened to me, to the voice of the Lord, a lion's going to kill you." And as soon as he departed, he found another man. And he said, "Please strike me." And that man did strike him. The prophet departed, waited for the king. And when the king passed by, the servant went out in the midst of battle. And behold, the man turned aside and brought a man to me and said, "Guard this man." And it goes on. And ultimately, the point is that God is going to bring judgment against Ahab.
Yeah.
And then I like this verse, which happens twice in this little section. "So the king of Israel went to his house sullen and vexed, and came to Samaria."
Yeah.
Sullen and vexed.
Yeah, kind of interesting language. And it's interesting the prophets are so committed to their message.
Yeah.
They're committed. This guy, he knows that Ahab will recognize him. So he's a prophet that's been around. But he knows that Ahab won't recognize him if he's been beat up.
Yeah.
And so he asks this guy, just disfigure me a little bit. And, the first guy says no. And a lion is going to eat him. And the second guy says, "Okay, sure. I don't understand why you'd want to be struck, but sure."
So now we come to this interesting story, which is going to lead to the end of Ahab, because Ahab covets Naboth's vineyard. Offers to buy it. Naboth says, "I'm not going to sell my family inheritance." And then Jezebel says, "I know how we can do it." And she manages to get it so that...
Yeah, she gets two wicked men to come and eat dinner with him and then accuse him and kill him.
Yep.
And I thought it's interesting that she uses wicked men to do that.
Yeah, worthless, wicked men. And on the basis of two witnesses.
Yeah.
But they're two false witnesses. So Naboth ends up being put to death, and then Jezebel says to Ahab, "Hey, now you can go have that field." And so he goes and takes it. And that's...
And God's not happy, right?
No.
Have you killed and taken possession? And, he says, anyone who dies in the city is going to be eaten by dogs. Anyone who dies in the open country is going to be eaten by birds. And Ahab is repentant.
Yeah.
I thought it's interesting that Ahab, he tears his clothes, puts sackcloth on, he lays in the ashes, and he goes about dejectedly. And the word of the Lord came to Elijah, and it says, "Have you seen how Ahab has humbled himself? Because he has humbled himself before me, I will not bring the disaster in his days. But in his son's days, I will bring the disaster upon his house." It lends back to some of these ideas that are in these Mosaic laws of that the Lord has steadfast love, that he loves it when people are repentant, that he loves it when people obey, and he will visit the iniquities of people, maybe not on them, but on, down 3 or 4 generations, and he'll visit, these good promises,
The thousand generations.
to the thousands of generations, which, was mentioned with his promise to Solomon, that Solomon's sons won't have the great things, but it won't be forever.
Right. I thought it was interesting that we kind of thought that when Elijah shared his mantle with Elisha, that would be at the end of his ministry, but here he's called back to serve again.
Yeah.
And this phrase is repeated a number of times in this section. The ones belonging to Ahab who dies in the city, the dogs will eat, and the one who dies in the field, the birds of heaven will eat.
Mm-hmm.
And that comes up a number of times in this passage, just saying that there's not going to be anybody there to bury them. They're going to be left to rot.
And now Micaiah will prophesy against Ahab.
And that is
in 22, starting in verse 13.
Okay, yes, I see it. That was interesting because there were other prophets that were prophesying to go up to battle, and Micaiah said, "I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to say something God didn't tell me to say."
And I thought this was interesting because Jehoshaphat asks for the word of the Lord, and the king says, I don't really know anyone. There's just the one guy, Micaiah, and I don't like him. I hate him because he never prophesies good concerning me. I just thought that was funny.
It was. I agree. And he gets people that are going to speak well of him, and Micaiah says, "I'm not going to say stuff that I shouldn't say." And then when he says when Micaiah says, "I saw all Israel scattered to the mountains like sheep that have no shepherd," the king says, "Did I not tell you that he would not prophesy good concerning me?"
Yeah.
I knew it wasn't. You know what? Maybe you should listen to, but
maybe you should change your ways if you're
Yeah.
Regularly having prophecies of evil towards you.
I also thought it was interesting that when he initially talks, Micaiah says, "Go up and succeed, and the Lord will give you into the hand of the king." and the king says, "Wait a minute, how many times am I to tell you? Speak the truth to me."
Yeah.
Well, you're going to die. And that's what happens. He ultimately meets his maker.
Yeah. He dies and is buried in Samaria.
Yeah.
And now I think this is some of the first mention of Samaria, and why the people of Israel, that we see later in the New Testament, reading through it, that they have some of these negative views of the Samaritans.
Right. And Samaria was mentioned earlier because the Shemai, that's not in this passage, I don't think.
Yeah.
Shemer or Shemai is the one who they take that city and they name it Samaria.
Right.
So then end of chapter 22, there's new rulers. Jehoshaphat, the son of Asa, became over Judah, and he walked in all the way of Asa his father and did not turn aside from it, doing right in the sight of the Lord. However, again, the high places were not taken away, and the people still sacrificed and burnt incense in the high places.
Yeah.
And he made peace with the king of Israel. And you can read more about it in the book of Chronicles.
Right.
So, and
then Ahaziah is king over Israel, right?
Yep.
The son of Ahab.
And he did evil in the sight of the Lord, walked in the way of his father, in the way of his mother, and in the way of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, who caused Israel to sin.
Mm-hmm.
So the book ends with it saying that he provoked the Lord of God, the Lord God of Israel, to anger.
In every way that his father had done.
Yeah. And so First Kings is, we start off and we have...
David, the man of God's own heart, and Solomon, this man of great wisdom, and then Solomon turns away, and now every king is evil.
And every king is causing anger.
Provoking the Lord. So it's kind of the sad ending to the story, and it's not going to get better for a while.
Yeah, I guess we're going to see what happens in Second Kings. See where the word takes us.
Yeah.
And incidentally, by the way, there's going to be some repeat. Ahab's going to come up again in Second Kings. So and that's kind of the way history is. You're following history of now two different nations, and they're intermingled. We're going to see this through Second Kings and First and Second Chronicles as they flesh out the story of how Israel came from Egypt to become its own nation.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and of course, as it is the sad ending that the Lord is provoked to anger in every way, there's still the saving grace that the Lord is good. He is full of steadfast love. He does have promises of good to the house of David and to the people of Israel.
And he's forgiving.
Yeah, and even to Ahab, who was this evil, terrible king, when he showed a repentant heart, God was still able to forgive and say, like, okay, we'll hold back for a little bit. Yeah. Things are going to go bad enough for you.
Yeah, it is a pretty amazing thought of how you have these evil kings and you have God at work in their lives and in the nation of Israel along the way.
Yeah.
First Kings takes about 2 hours to read. I think it's worth reading. And if you don't want to read the whole thing, I suggest start at chapter 17, where Elijah the Tishbite shows up. The rest of it you can figure out for yourself, but there's lots of good passages there worth reading.
Yeah.
All right.
God definitely shows his hand.
Yes. So we will see you tomorrow on Second Kings. God bless.